Hello,
On.
everyone. Oh, yeah. What's that?
I'm going to have to do a thing that I did with the real world the last time we talked about this.
Okay.
The last time I talked about the parareal, which is I'm going to have to climb on a box.
You are
I can't
indeed.
even escape the
Well,
fact that
yeah.
I'm short in real life in VRChat. So let me climb on the box.
Welcome.
Ah!
Good to
I'm on the
see you.
box. Okay, we're here.
All right, good. We're here.
Good to see
It's good
you.
to see you too.
Okay, we're here.
All right, excellent. Great. So, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our panel. I'm On. I am the lead of systems design for VRChat, and this is my friend and colleague Shibco from the New Design Congress. In a moment, I'm going to pass the mic to
Hi.
him. Yeah, go ahead and let you introduce yourself. I'm going to give it to you in a minute. Let me do my spiel. I'm going to let Shibco introduce
I just said
himself
hi.
and his organization more thoroughly. But I kind of wanted to kick us off a little bit with a quick grounding to let you know what we're going to be doing over the next 50 minutes or so. And that's really to kind of share with you, and you're already getting a taste of this, a little bit of the conversations that the two of us have been having together with each other over the last couple of years. But we'd like to try to start doing this a little bit more in public. The formal version of this is that a big part of this is that we're trying to look for a theoretical framework for discussing the issues that are listed. If that sounds really academic and terrifying, I'm just going to reword that for you right now. We're going to try to figure out what to call what's happening around us. Fandoms in general, and furry specifically, is an extraordinarily difficult thing to pin down. And there's also a little bit of a danger there that in defining something that we love, we'll end up accidentally killing the magic. But at the same time, I think we feel like we need to try to understand what's happening so that we can bake the best parts of these ideas into our systems, like VRChat. It seems really fitting to me that the Furality theme of Umbra asks us to, quote, imagine a resident community rising to craft their own destiny amidst the stars in the shadow of the crevice. Given that we're all here, inside of an immersive virtual furry convention, we can probably take a few things for granted, right out of the gate. First, we know that the real world is struggling. We find ourselves kind of surrounded by a state of brokenness that mainstream social media and technology hasn't fixed. In fact, arguably, that same technology has made humanity a bit worse, and we're kind of more lonely, more aggressive, maybe more isolated, less able to reach out to each other to build the networks of mutual aid that we desperately need to survive right now. At the same time, many of us here have found ways to use that same technology to carve out our own spaces here and in person. We've found ways to flip the script, using an infrastructure of command and control to explore identity, gender, sexuality, and define and build our chosen families. Furry and the furry fandom is something extraordinarily special, and we want to celebrate that and also examine kind of what makes it that way. So today here, we're going to talk about that effort that we are all in this room already part of. And we hope that this starts to outline the shape of a radically optimistic future for the vision for the future that we're actually all really excited to be in, even if it's going to take us some work to get there. So the first slide, let me do this. See, I don't want to be on your box now. I'm too tall. Step there.
Come over. Come on.
Come closer.
Like,
You want me on the, you want me from the box?
you're like on the corner. Yeah, there we go. Come over.
Now I'm staying here. I'm staying here.
We're good. Yeah.
So the title of our talk today comes from an early 2000s internet meme known as Dmitry Finds Out, which consists of an interview that was originally shot in a student nightclub in Russia. The format applies mismatched subtitles on top of the footage of a reporter who was originally interviewing an apparently intoxicated clubber about the music that was playing in the room. In this particular version of the meme, our protagonist Dmitry expresses his deep fear and loathing for Osama bin Laden, is told then that the US has just tracked down and killed bin Laden, and reacts by breaking into a celebratory dance. And halfway through, the subtitles read, "The club is bumping, the ladies look good, the alcohol is flowing, there's much pain in the world, but not in this room." As an internet old who remembers life on the network before there was a web and also before ad-driven social media networks took over everything, I see a really strange and beautiful beauty in this thought being expressed in kind of a throwaway and slightly fucked up storytelling device that also references American imperialism and the war on terror. The meme invites us to laugh at Dmitry and his goofy expression, and also our overblown fear of something that is both seemingly irrelevant, but also pressingly real. Everything about this should be off-putting. It should be embarrassing. It's bad. It's cringy. But it wraps itself around a really beautiful, wonderful truth that I also think sits at the center of something that makes our furry communities great. So by the end of this talk, when you leave, I hope that this is the thing that you take with you. The essence of furry, and on a good day, I think the essence of VRChat. Club Fin is bumping. The avatars look great. There's much pain in the world, but not in this headset. Do you?
Yeah, so beautifully said. My name is Shibco. I run a research organization called New Design Congress. And we've been talking, New Design Congress itself, let me start, comes from a place where I originally started this work thinking that we could solve the world with encryption, right? We could make the world a better place just through encryption. And I worked on Signal before it launched, the secure messaging app. I've done a lot of these sort of projects around this idea of bringing encryption to the masses. And what we found is that actually that's not the case. Despite the fact that encryption is everywhere, the world continues to get worse. And so I started the New Design Congress with kind of this idea of what is the difference between what is said to be happening in digitized societies versus what is actually happening. And so there's where we fit together is this idea of taking the nuances that Arne just talked about here and kind of questioning them on a broader level, right? This is where theory and practice comes into place, right? On one hand, you have theory, which is, a little bit foreign to a lot of furries here tonight, but also what we do is we try to bring this into a world in much the same way as Arne does in the work in your work in VRChat. It's try to take these kind of concepts and apply them in different places. We do this as well, but in a sense with documentaries and other pieces of work that kind of take these concepts and bring them to people. And really, if I move forward, I think where we start with this slide here is a term that came early in New Design Congress's life, this idea of weaponized design. And there's a straight line between what Arne is talking about with Dimitri in the club and the kind of the way in which this transcends or doesn't it's not cringe, but it's endearing. There's this kind of line that you can draw between what Arne just brought up and this work here with weaponized design. So what is weaponized design? It's a term that describes a system or an interface that harms users whilst performing exactly it's supposed to. So rather than being hacked or having your stuff leaked or being in a place where you have a dark UX pattern that tricks you to sign up to Amazon Prime or something like that, this is instead a system that works exactly as it's supposed to, and it harms you. And the slide I have up here is, of course, the Apple AirTag, which I think is exactly what we were talking about before. It is the quintessential idea of what weaponized design is. An AirTag is something that you use to keep track of something in your life that you care about, whether it's a computer or a backpack or something like that. But it's also used to track people. It's used to stalk people, right? And this is a topic, the idea of power and these sorts of targeting of individuals, I think is something, and unfortunately a lot of people in our community have experienced. And the idea of the AirTag, this simple tool that's meant to be something that helps keep your belongings safe, is also something that's weaponized by its design without changing anything at all to harm people. And so the question really becomes, like, if you start looking at these and you see the AirTag as being one example of this, you start seeing this everywhere. Right? You see this in the photos that Apple produces as part of the memories that they produce. Like you have an algorithmic selection of memories that is supposed to be something beautiful, but shows you something traumatic. Or these, all of these, the way in which we dogpile on each other on social media, or these sorts of things going viral for bad reasons. All of these different tools. All these different examples are ways in which designs of systems can be weaponized, and usually this comes about as a result of people being quite. It's not intentional, right? It's not necessarily something that's like, hey, we're going to make a system that's going to be terrible, right? But over time, these systems, they're designed with privilege or with like these assumptions in mind, and then as they are used by communities and by societies, they become weaponized over time.
That's right.
Right? And so this is where we're at. We're at a situation right now where the tech that we have, whether it's the takeover of Twitter or the struggles that we have in different platforms, platforms, we're at this place where a lot of the tech we have, we don't trust. And yet at the same time, as Arn just mentioned here, we're also in this place where, especially in this room right now, things feel different for a lot of reasons. The question here is why? What is this? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I think what I really like.
Do you want to continue?
Sure, just a riff on that a little bit. But what I really like about that framing is, again, I think it's in a way it's an antidote to the kind of classic argument that you hear from a lot of folks that technology is somehow neutral, which is patently false. It is absolutely never neutral. But rather than start from that, we can start from the idea that it's powerful, right? Like the technology has a great deal of power, and then the question is who gets to wield that and why and when. And I think what you really brilliantly trace right there with the AirTag is that having not considered other possibilities, what ends up happening is that the folks who are sort of in charge will design a system that optimizes for them, but has unforeseen consequences. And one of the things, again, that I love about Furry in general and communities on VRChat is that this is a case study in some of those communities, right? Not everybody, but many of us. And so so we can start to look, and I'm leading into your next slide here, but this starts to tell us something different about the way that we interact with these technologies here, and that becomes both a kind of example that we can use and also something we can try to maybe amplify. So what are we looking at? What is this?
So, An.
Yes.
This is a screenshot of you and I in VRChat. We were talking, we were going through stuff, we were sharing spaces with people as a research project. And I took you to, and the people who were with us, to the recreation of the Counter-Strike map CS Office.
It was the first time we met, and you're right.
And,
yes.
Right, in VRChat, after talking for ages. It was a really surreal moment. It felt like we were meeting each other in real life, but also not, right? It felt like something was happening there. And then we went to this space that both of us kind of knew, and the people that we were with also felt comfortable in, the people who weren't as familiar with VRChat. But this was a space. So, okay, we're going to go to the map, CS Office, the Counter-Strike map, hostage map, right? It's been in existence for, 20 years now? A long time. It's a cultural staple point. And we were going to go in here in VRChat, and then we spent some time in here. And then what you showed us is this. What are we seeing here? What is this?
Yeah. I also, because it's relevant, the other part of that story I want to remind you of is that I had a really weird reaction to this, which I was having a tremendously good time meeting you all. And I am actually not a CSGO player, so I didn't really recognize the map. But it did have this like high quality but very eerie vibe. And there were things like basically the ephemera of a shooting. And I think at some point I was having a blast, and then I was like, I'm sad, or I feel weird about sharing this with you because I've just met you, but I feel like I'm in a recreation of a school shooting right now. And it was like this total mindfuck where I was
an office shooting.
Right. And I was what environment are we in? And it wasn't related directly to that, but sort of we quickly ended up in like a kind of couch area and sitting and just kind of talking about stuff. And then I pulled out this avatar just because we were showing off abs. This is an avatar that it has a shader on it that lets you, basically when you wear this avatar, your vision is blacked out. And the only way that you can see is by putting your paws, actually, they're Rex abs, up against surfaces or other people's faces. So I think that's what you're getting at, which is that basically, we're in this context that is in many ways very kind of, literally dehumanizing, like removing humans. And then we found ourselves having just met each other and in what was actually an incredibly intimate moment where you're right up against each other and touching each other's faces, right?
Right, and so what's really amazing about that is like what we had is this intimate moment, right? Like we had this not in like in a sexual context, but like just in a general like a sensory way. We had phantom touch, and we had this like moment where we recontextualized the digital space that was completely the opposite, right? Again, pointing out the fact that it's a Counter-Strike map. There's this kind of idea of reconverting that into something else, and what this represents is kind of this combination of like the digital space aligning in this context where we were meeting for the first time. It's like a really important kind of emotional moment with these sorts of contradictory spaces online, is that we had this moment where the kind of exploratory space that we were in, the kind of emotional nature of us meeting for the first time, regardless of whether it was digital or physical, with the kind of contradiction or the kind of the curiosity of the digital space that we found ourselves in, that became in parallel, right? So that became two spaces operating at the same time in one space. And as a result of that, this third space emerged, right? This idea that like, because everything lined up so perfectly, we became like this third space emerged, exemplified by the shader, by the touch, by the accentuation of something that bridged the space between us, right? Like this idea of this shader, this avatar being an acknowledgement of that space. And I think what's beautiful about this shot, we call this, in New Design Congress, we call this the parareal, parallel reality. This idea that when you exist in the world and you feel a certain way, and whether you're quite lonely or whether you are in a playful space or something like that, when your real world, the conditions that you find yourself in line up with something you see in VRChat or in another digital space, you have these moments where they become really powerful, really meaningful, really transformative. A really great example of this, which we've used in our research, is the example of people, male or female identifying individuals getting into VR, putting a headset on, inhabiting an avatar that presents differently to how society says they see themselves, or how they should be, quote unquote, seeing themselves, and realizing that actually maybe they have gender dysphoria, and the idea that their physical reality, which is that maybe something lies beneath the surface, something that they're concerned about, when that matches up beautifully or completely with their the digital interaction of like trying on different avatars. That's an example of the parareal too. Reddit calls this cracking the egg. You know what I mean? And this is what this is all about.
Yeah. What I also love here, this is not a bit. We did not rehearse this, but I remember distinctly when this happened. I was we were getting to know each other. I love this concept of the parareal, but it was relatively new to me. And I literally remember you saying, "Holy shit, this is a parareal moment. I want to take pictures of this because someday I'm going to use this in a talk." And I was like, "All right, you do that."
I forgot, yeah.
But no, right. Yeah. But here we are, right? So
here we are.
Yeah.
Right here.
But I think you're completely right. And I think the other reason why I'd like to link that a little bit to Furry specifically is I think Furry also does this in physical space, which is really interesting to me. And again, interesting to this particular audience. They're not the only group, but most FurCons are also similarly spaces where you're occupying something, probably a hotel or some sort of a generic space. But you're occupying a space that doesn't really exist for that. And you're asserting, dominance isn't the right word, but it's a kind of like, there's a very clear assertion of reality, of like, this is the reality. There's a thing I was thinking about this at
consensus.
Yeah, a consensus reality. But there's also like, there are all these lines that are very similar to VR. So the one I was thinking about is the fact that at every con I've ever been to, there's like a line of fursuits that are hanging out front. And this is not a deliberate thing that people do, right? I mean, it's just you're hanging out up front. Maybe you're smoking, you're trying to cool off, whatever you're doing. But that is very deliberately, very clearly like a phalanx of statement of what this space is. And every single other person who's encountering the hotel gets to walk through that. And it's a pretty powerful move, in fact, for the community to say, like, for this moment in time, we own this ground. We are not ceding this ground. We're declaring this as our space, and the rules are a little bit different. And again, I think that gesture
this happened with Telegram and with VRChat.
Yes. Yeah, it also happens digitally, but I think that gesture is incredibly important, and that's the thing that I'd like to figure out also how to like preserve and amplify. All right, I'll stop chatting about that. But yeah, that's that. That was a good picture.
So I think what this on the surface this is fun, right? Because I'm moving to the next slide now. On the surface, this is like, okay, so we've talked a little bit so far about like, here's the parareal. It's a concept of like when the digital space and the real world aligns perfectly for an individual. And in that moment, they see themselves and the world around them in a new light, right? That's the idea. Whether they see themselves, people around them, their identity, whether they see some kind of new perspective on the world itself, it's triggered by this combination of their physical reality mixed with the digital interface and how they interact with each other, with people on the internet. And so we've talked about this in the intimate sense, right? Like you and I touching each other in VRChat in this shader. But this is more than that, right? Like this goes deeper.
Yeah, for sure. It's writ large. So I slipped this slide in because there's a specific story I want to tell, but kind of trying to put it in line with the parareal moment. If we're talking about really powerful ideas, there's also there's moments in time where you can figure out that you have access to this power and then make choices around how it's applied. And again, that's another kind of part of this exercise is that as a designer working in this space, I want to be able to articulate that and work with it. But I'd also love to be able to better enable the community to do it. Okay, so the specific story, I don't actually know this particular fur, so I apologize if this is your friend. I just really like the picture. But I'm using the bottom half of this. I'm juxtaposing it with a screenshot above from an internet meme series called Flex Air. This is pre-Ukraine war. The Flex Air series is essentially an internet shitpost. It has everything that you'd want in a shitpost, including plenty of things that are problematic. But by and large, it traces the story of a bunch of meme characters, including Ricardo, the go-go dancer, and a whole bunch of other folks from actually from gay porn and from other things that band together.
You had to say.
Yeah, I had to say it. That band together with other folks on the internet to wage a war against some other meme characters like Chungus and also Putin and also Lukashenko. Okay, so why am I talking about this? I used to sometimes point people to this again prior to the Ukraine war as kind of an explanation about what was happening online. Around the time that I became aware of this, also there's another moment, which is that the buzzer station in Russia, there's a famous station that since the Cold War has been broadcasting this buzzer, got hacked by Ukrainians, but they posted this on a Twitch stream. So this is like highly esoteric, nerdy shit where someone is basically jamming a radio station and they were taking requests over Twitch and then playing it on top of the Russian military station. And a whole bunch of folks were like, and then they were also encoding meme GIFs, like pictures and things, and then putting them in the waterfall diagram. Okay, so that's the thing that happened. So this sort of universe is unfolding in the technical world. Around the same exact time, a law was passed in Russia that explicitly outlawed LGBT as a recruitment thing. And as a result of that, the local furry community in Moscow got labeled a terrorist organization for having their furry hangout. Sort of as a spin-off of that, a component or a couple of the furs got together and said, we really need to help some folks here. We need to figure out a way to essentially create an underground railroad for trans furs. And they did this. So along with some help of some of the folks in Europe, they managed to create a situation where they could get people across the border and into Europe as quickly as possible. So this is, again, a moment of something that it matters quite a bit. And I think, I don't want to steal your thunder, but we were chatting a bit about this beforehand. You pointed out that not only does the EU not support this, they don't even know it happened, right? It's like a completely under the radar thing that the community...
This is the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the whole point. This is the whole point of this discussion today, is to make this is the crazy, tragic, and also beautiful thing about this is, like, writ large, we don't know even that this is happening in our own community, right? But like, actually, this happens all the time on individual levels, both the whether you find your space as a queer person or even as just someone neurodivergent, right? Like someone who looks for community belonging and finds it in the furry community. This also happens when you trace it all the way through to these sorts of big geopolitical events. We're in these spaces, right? In ways that nobody knows about, even in many cases, broadly speaking, our own communities, right? Like where so much of this is like hidden beneath the surface or private out of necessity, these sorts of things, which means that we don't see this. But all of this has to do with these connections that happen as a result of something deeper than just meeting someone on an IRC channel. Right? It's more than that, right? Yeah. That's the point. It's more than just meeting someone on Telegram. It's what comes beyond that, right? Like where the kind of the digital and the real kind of collide. And from our work at New Design Congress, we do work not just in the furry space, but we also try to work, not very successfully, with funders, with the European Union, with other organizations who, supposed to know what's going on, and they don't know. They don't know this stuff, and they're not interested in this stuff yet. That's what's crazy to me. Should I move to the next slide?
Yeah, I think so. That sounds good.
Beep. What are we looking at here?
Sorry, apologize. I have a head cold. Coughing up a lung. Sorry. So this is a photo of of a party, essentially, right? So this is the thing too, is that we got we're going kind of back and forth between relatively prosaic. I don't know if prosaic's the right word, but fluffy sparkle dogs gaming, and some pretty heavy, serious international issues. I don't think all of it needs to be in either camp, which is why this is a wonderful, wonderful thing. That the kind of mechanism of this is really quite straightforward and simple, and it's a kind of care, a kind of intimacy, a kind of community sense of shared values. And just having that as a fundamental thing is something that I think furry it can be pretty good at. Furry's not perfect, right? We'll maybe talk a little bit about that. There are problems with that in any fandom, and conflict resolution and sort of how you deal with these things. But again, I really truly believe that if we start to examine what subcultures are doing within the context of other frameworks. I guess I should have made this point a little earlier. Sorry, but the thing is that one of the lessons that we know from both furry and queer communities is that those communities are astoundingly good at carving out these spaces in hostile environments. That's just a thing that we do, right? We always have done. Yeah. That even in places where it's literally illegal to be gay, or literally there are people coming to arrest you, there are still parties, right? We still get together and dance. We still figure this out. We still find a way to each other. I think that's incredible, and I want to embrace it. I also would love to have a world where that wasn't necessary, where we could move away from that having to be an absolute survival strategy and towards just a celebration. But that's where I think some of these platforms can come in handy specifically. So I would suggest that the new kind of set of social interactions on the internet specifically, and in this camp I would put what folks are doing with Telegram, with Discord, with Signal, and with VRChat, is fundamentally different than the previous approach. And it leans far more towards this notion of it's not filter bubble, it's about community, creating your space and being able to define your own rules within those bounds. And I think that, again, for me is sort of key.
And I think I want to tie this image to the next one we'll show, right? And I want to just make this maybe a little bit more evocative. I think this is a revolutionary image. I think this image that we're looking at right now is iconic, right? It's one of a series. I mean, we're in this period of time right now where the photos that we're taking in spaces like VRChat, but not only here, there's the furry, the venues themselves, at cons, in games, these sorts of things. We're literally creating the iconography of what comes next, right? And I don't mean that in a sense to I'm not trying to say this to be hey, so we're making history. It's not about that, right? Because it's never about that. The intimacy it doesn't work with the idea of we're breaking ground at the same time. But I do think it's important to note, and we'll get to this. You touched on this before about how the negatives associate with this, but the fact that we're in this space where we've moved away from a sort of old world of queerness, an old world of disability rights, an old world of connection and isolation, and moving into this new space, whether it's VRChat, whether it's video games, whether it's these sorts of models, these all matter, and they're all terribly misunderstood, and they're all iconic in their own way. And I want to just kind of give you a sense of this by this next image, right? So this one here on my screen now is this is a screenshot from the credit in the bottom right hand corner. I'm on a Quest 2. I can't read this on my screen right now.
But, okay, that's fine.
The credit is on the bottom right hand side.
Ruby's home design.
Ruby's home design. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so I just turned around. I can actually see it on the big screen behind me. This is amazing. Anyway, so this is a screenshot from a Sims 4 content creator, and some of the work that we've been doing at New Design Congress a lot of this work into the Parareal extends beyond the furry community, right? The furry community itself. I'm furry. This is a space where I'm interested, so this informs a lot of what I do. But I want to just point out that there's this entire world that we've been looking at of people, teenagers, individuals, young people who are not just playing video games, bucking this trend of Zoomers or whatever being people who don't pay attention to anything. Instead, we're in this world where people make mods outside of the approved mods or the approved distribution platforms that Electronic Arts gives them. They publish their stuff on Patreon. They publish it on Tumblr, and these are teenagers who put themselves through college by basically modding The Sims 4, and so there's these economies that exist, right? That are these new economies where, as an anecdote, I've been looking into this for a little while. I went to somebody's, not this person, but I went to somebody's Telegram. I keep saying that. I went to their Tumblr. They had a huge Patreon following. I wanted to know why it dropped down. And the reason it dropped down was because there was a post on this really popular Sims 4 content creators Tumblr where they were just like, sorry, I've got to stop making stuff. I've got to go to architecture school now. I'm doing my undergraduate in architecture, right? And this is someone who had 2,000-3,000 patrons paying a minimum of $2 to $3 a month, right? And who had just like built this career out of not just making clothes or hairstyles, but GPU shaders, right? Like injecting DLLs into The Sims 4. And this is the world that we're in right now, right? If the previous world, if Counter-Strike and Dota and League of Legends all came from the previous generation of modders, right? Which are like very highly centralized and sort of there were dozens or hundreds of mods and only one or two of them are successful per platform. Now we're in this place where actually the inverse is the case, right? Where you can build a following, you can have these cultivated experiences where you create a kind of, in the Sims 4 context, you create this world, you create a kind of livelihood around that, and there's an interaction there which kind of skirts the idea of the parareal as well. So there's a commerce case for this too, right? There's much of what we're doing at like Furality, lots of the historical, like lots of talks that have come before us have to do with to skilling people up within the community, right? And so there's these kinds of ways in which you can take the initial thing of feeling this kind of this idea of the parareal inside you, and then like having it bring skills or political power or other forms of transformation into your world. And I think that it's really amazing that VRChat is not the only example, but that The Sims 4, as old as it is, has the same kinds of histories to it, right? This is really amazing to me.
So what I love about that, I have a question for you on this, but what I love about this is that what we're, I think, talking about is using the materiality that we're left with, like essentially using the infrastructure that we're given as raw material to re-articulate in the mode that we want, which is, again, that sort of...
That's exactly it.
It's a very powerful gesture to say, I take this, I'm going to turn it into something else. And as you're pointing out, like we do,
but that's a furry in a hotel as well, right? That's
right.
The idea.
So that was my question.
Dealer den in a market.
Yeah. Is what is different then, or is there a meaningful difference between the furry approach to this and say other fandoms?
So I think so. I think that the difference is that for furries, it's not just a game, right? In the furry community, this has been spoken about before, but I think it's really even more powerful when we look at it in terms of things like The Sims 4 or other commercial examples of the parareal. The fact that we see each other through each other, and the fact that there's a participatory nature to everything that we do, and the fact that there's not a central IP associated, even like, no offense, but like VRChat is not the center of the furry community.
I'm not offended in the slightest. I think it's a really important point. In fact,
I'm being
I know.
You're
but,
giving
me
I'm just like
I appreciate it.
I'm like nudge. I'm being a bit of a jerk. Yeah. I'm being slightly jealous of your job, but like right. But my point is that like that even if it was, it would be a disaster, right? If furry was equal to VRChat, that would be a disaster. At the same time, I see VRChat, from our work that we do at New Design Congress, I see VRChat as being in the same place as a platform like Telegram was 5 years ago, 8 years ago. Like at its very beginning, when it was being adopted and driven, the early feature sets were being driven by a core contingency of passionate communities that were helping to shape a platform that sort of has kind of arrived at this place, right? And I think this is where something like this is the difference between the furry community and other platforms, including something like The Sims 4 and other platforms, is that the furry space, the engine is what we build. The game engine, if you want to call it that, is we move between them like venues, right? We move between hotels, we move between platforms, right? But the difference, why that is so much more powerful than something like The Sims 4, even though The Sims 4 itself is like a tool for economic for building skills and building someone's career, is that The Sims 4 is ultimately still The Sims 4, regardless of what you do inside it. Like it still has these limitations associated with it that it can't break from. And that is, I think, what's really powerful about when you apply the idea of the parareal, of like the digital and the real colliding and producing something more powerful than that. When the digital is as flexible as the real world, that amplifies the opportunities of what's possible, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. The fact that Furry is not of VRChat but is occupying VRChat is incredibly important. And I think you said this, but kind of two key things there. One is that furries actually we have data on this from Fur Science, and they actually collected like do
For
furries
science, yeah.
do furries particularly respond to commercial IP or their own IP, and which? And essentially what the data tells us is furries don't care; they just want it to be furry. It's like it's sort of like it doesn't really matter. But what's really great about that, right, is that it doesn't hang on any one platform, one organization, one person's choice to, if Disney comes in and starts, as they do, asserting their IP protections on lots of things, it does not shut down cons. It can't. And even within the community, I think that creates a sense of resilience that most organizations, if you put it that loosely, are essentially like private parties organized by a few individuals, which can have a problem, but it also means that there is no God of furry, right? There's nobody's in charge, nobody's writing the Bible, and that allows the space for a million things to grow, which is great. It's sort of a kind of anarchist approach writ large. Sorry, go ahead.
And this is what makes it so powerful about like what we've seen in queer spaces in the real world,
exactly,
right? Which is that like in the real world, take the United Kingdom for example, and the kind of disappearance of venues, right? Like this has happened around the world, but in the UK in particular, there's been like a receding of queer spaces in the real world. One thing that's really fascinating about how furries move is that at the end of the day, whether it's Telegram, Signal, Twitter, VRChat, whatever it is, if it's not built by furries, if it's being sort of inhabited by furries themselves, much like real world venues, if the venue doesn't fit, you move on, right? And I think that's like when you consider that historically so many movements have been in like completely dependent on the venue itself. That I think is a really interesting concept, right? Like the idea that we have a movement, a queer neurodivergent movement that actually is able to resist attacks on the venues themselves, whether it's digital or physical, right? Because again, like, I live in Berlin. Eurofurence moved last year from Berlin to Hamburg. The reasons why are not for this talk. We have 12 minutes left.
We have 12 minutes left.
But it did, right? It did successfully, right? And it's interesting because it's hard to see even in the physical context, but even more so in digital spaces. Like, everybody in this room has been through the Furality onboarding, which connects a whole bunch of accounts together. It's an engineering feat that like brings parts of these venues together. It brings Discord, VRChat all together in a seamless way, in a way that tech companies would only dream of, right? It's crazy.
There's another story that sort of ties some of these ideas together that I want to share, which is, so recently there's been a podcast that came out, and I was ready to hate watch it. It's called Fur and Loathing, which, if anybody remembers, is actually
exactly what you're talking about.
Also the title of a famous CSI episode that furries generally hate because it didn't set us in the best light. This particular podcast talks about the MFF chemical gas attack, which a lot of folks, even in the community, don't realize was the second largest chemical weapons attack in the United States and is currently, to this day, still being investigated by the FBI. It's a big deal. And so the question is, like, where did that attack come from and why? And kind of trying to unpack that is the project of this podcast. What I particularly like, though, and I want to trace it back to VRChat, oddly, and even Furality, is that there's an element to this about like who gets to tell this story. And the thing is that what I thought I was going to hate was that Nikki Wolf, who's sort of the pop culture journalist who did it, I was like, this is going to be another shit show. It's not. He's actually been incredibly thoughtful and incredibly generous, and really seems to have found a love of the community. Part of that midway through is he talked about, I was at MFF and someone took me to this room and they showed a whole bunch of videos and I don't know what they were from and they were just deeply emotionally affecting. Basically, like somewhere between the jank of things, I started seeing like memorials to lost friends and just extremely heartfelt outreach to things. And so this moment for this journalist turns out to have been the VRChat Furality community reel that was aired at MFF. And so I love that. And so kind of wrapping that up, like, you're correct. Like, every day that the furries are still on VRChat, again, as a professional person, like, I personally want it because I'm a furry, but also I consider that a victory. So the more that we can do to kind of keep that space, fertile ground for these types of connections is something that's like deeply important to me. All right.
But that's also just as a thing. That is Nikki Wolf inhabiting the parareal.
That's right.
Like
encountering
that, right?
encountering the parareal and then inhabiting it, seeing it and going, holy shit, that's a thing, and then actually being in that space, which is
We have 2 more slides.
We do have 2 more.
We also
slides.
have 9 minutes.
We have 9 more minutes. Let's go.
There's a big clock here that we can see.
All right, so here we go.
This slide?
This slide is, in fact, a shot of the VRChat meetup at FWA. I'm imagining that some of you are actually there. Yeah, I see some
Look at the size of it.
Yeah, right? Look at the size of it. And
can we have that many people in a VRChat instance? We can't, right?
No.
Yeah.
I see somebody gesturing. Oh, maybe. No, it's fine. We can have that technical conversation later. What I really wanted to point out as well is, like, I unfortunately was not at FWA, but I would understand that this was a portion of the people who are able to fit in the room, and that this was perhaps a better attended than any of the events at the entire con.
Flex.
I mean, it is a flex, but also, like, for me, I want to both, like, be like, look at but also, like, this makes me feel like my job is worth something, right? Like, honestly, like, seeing a room full of people figure out how to find their community. I don't know. I don't have words. It's amazing. So I love this. This is a physical representation of this, right? This is the manifestation of that.
So energy. There's this documentary. There's a documentarian named Little Purr, Joe Hunting, who made a series of documentaries on VRChat.
He's got 2 sessions
and the first one, which is a
short
film, is called.
He's presenting at this.
I know. Yeah, I know. So you should, if they. I mean, I can't remember where we're at, right? But because I don't know what day it is, but I will say that, like, if you go and see his sessions and then go and look at them up if they've already passed. But what I will say is that basically we've lost the slide. Oh my god.
I have.
What I will say is that
I hit a button.
This work really comes into that.
This
right?
is not
like, this work is
sorry. Technical glitch from the booth. We're all good. Go ahead.
Technical glitch. Yep. And then
you're good.
Voice
Sorry.
in my ear, and then, like, threw me out. No, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you, voice in my ear. Thank you, God. But thank you, technical booth. Anyway, so what I was trying to say is that in this work, he identifies the kind of power of what makes VRChat special.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm not here to be like a shill for VRChat, but what I am saying is, like, there are these markers that you see. Like, VR is this thing, of course, we all know this, it's sweaty, it's horrible, I'm sweating right now, you are probably too, everyone in this room is, and yet somehow there's something here that brings us back, right? And we can say it's immersion, we can say it's that, everything's kind of fun and cool, you might have, like, whatever the interest is here. It's actually, I believe, more than that, and I think these are represented in these images, right? And I think that there's a historical context that has been here since the 90s and the 80s in terms of computing, that extends and becomes more and more urgent over time, which is best exemplified in images like this. And what I'm interested in is, when I look at this image that we have here of this crowd of people, what I ask myself as part of my work at New Design Congress is, like, what I see here is, like, a resilient economy, right? Built around this idea of societies that are able to take care of each other in a broader sense, not in a utopian sense, because obviously there's going to be disagreement, but one that's resilient to the wider forces of the world, right? And I think, as a final thing, I'll just say, so when we first kicked off New Design Congress back in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we were invited to a series of panels with the UK creative economy sort of universities, things like that, who were asking questions about how do we keep our creative class from falling, like, slipping into struggle, into economic hardship. And what I found really striking in that moment was how people with similar skill sets to people in the furry fandom, the furry community, who weren't furry, were more likely to be sliding into economic hardship during the pandemic. That's not to say that everybody in the pandemic who was furry was doing well for themselves, but you were more likely to pay your rent at a time where there were places in the world where an artist with a similar skill set was unable to do so. And I think that like that, as we started looking into that more broadly, we saw that more and more and more. And what I see in this image, in the context of a furry convention, is a kind of demographic here that kind of proves that, that kind of indicates that when I look at this image, I don't just look at a user base. I'm not saying you do either, but I don't just see a user base. I see these connections. I see collaboration and transaction and things like that. And that is what I'm most excited about, because I feel like this is an example of how the Parareal moves from just being a journey of self-discovery into some kind of form of resilience.
I would absolutely agree with that. And then in the last like sort of few minutes that we have, I just want to say that so I promised at the beginning, and I think you've seen some sort of unabashed love for the furry community and for VR as well. I do mean all of that.
We didn't get to this,
but there's a larger question too of like, does this scale? Where does this go? Where does it live? And we know that like, not everybody in the world is a furry or wants to be. Not everyone in the world is queer. Not everyone in the world wants a VR headset. In fact, there are some really specific cases where that's actually not helpful. One of the things that like we were discussing is the fact that one of the problems with immersive VR that sort of enables this is that it also cuts off your sensorium. And so there's a great portion of the world, namely mostly women, who cannot afford to have a space in which they feel comfortable cutting off their sensoriums, right? Like having no visual reference point for the world around you is an incredibly dangerous act. So there's a power imbalance in the technology, right? But I still believe that what we're doing is actually demonstrating out how these can be used for a better type of future. And that's the kind of radical optimism that I'd like to take. I think that if as a project we can figure out a way to distill out some of these things like economic solidarity, like networks of care, and articulate them in terms of the technical scales, systems that do scale, then we possibly have a shot. We possibly have a shot that is different than anything that I have seen on the network in the last 20 years. And I am like hyped and terrified. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's like this at the same time, the stakes are also high in a sense of like the kind of older forms of like policing internally within communities or calls for justice themselves. Like there's broader issues that we have around like, because the world that we operate in it has such a heightened kind of importance and there's so much at stake. There's also like ways in which 3 minutes and we're only getting to the actual real thing here we're talking about. Yeah.
Always
but like
the way.
there's like this is we were hoping to lay the groundwork and then sort of be like exploring how some of these issues augment the conflict in our lives. Like as Arn mentioned, like if you're a vulnerable person, you're not putting on. VR headsets will never be mainstream because unfortunately there's a large number of people in the world who deal with familial violence in their lives, and so you'll never put a headset on, even if it's an XR headset. But also beyond that, like when these communities are effective, the stakes are higher. So these are spaces where things like call-outs or harassment, these sorts of things, can potentially have serious consequences beyond just like turning off the internet or otherwise barking things off, right? And so again, we're not doing the justice that we need to because there's a giant 3-minute ticket right in the middle of this room.
But we did promise that we would start a conversation. So yeah.
We did promise that, and there's two of us here on the stage with like a body of work each of us,
That's right.
and hopefully together that can start this discussion. And I encourage, if this is of interest to you, like please reach out to us.
Absolutely. I want to put in a plug for your website, which is linked off of the talk, and also mine, I guess. But please check out the New Design Congress. I'm going to specifically recommend, I don't know which one you would recommend, but I'm going to recommend that you find the Joe Hunting episode of the Parareal, where you show the precursor to the HBO film. It's the Shiba interview, which I personally actually liked better than the feature film. And then you do an interview. I can't remember what the order, but you basically walk through the set and you talk about it.
We do the film first and then we interview him.
And that was probably the second thing that I ever saw from the New Design Congress. And I was like, I got to find you guys. The first was something completely different, but I was like, yeah, okay. So check that out. I don't know if you have any...
Joe Hunting is 1 p.m. Eastern Sunday.
Thank you.
If you want to tell
Joe
him.
Hunting is 1 p.m. Eastern Sunday. God has told me this. So please go see that talk as well.
What's that, God? What's that?
Cool.
Sorry.
Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming.
God.
I don't know if you have any closing thoughts. It's been delightful.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Truly.
Really. I'm happy you're here. I truly am.
I love, like 1 hour ago we were like, what are we going to talk about? I knew that we knew
Not
what we were
entirely
going to talk
true.
about,
It
but
was
we were
a
like
little-
freaking
it's a
out.
little bit true.
I know, but we were like, oh my god, what do we do?
I think it's more like how
I
think it's more like how do we fit this into 60 minutes, right? Of compressed conversation. Also, we both can probably talk the air out of a room for an hour, but trying to figure out a way to do it in a way that engages the community. I don't know if we've accomplished that. We're gonna find out. But yeah, I think we're onto something.
I think so. I think we
Yeah, that's
broadly
right. Yeah,
are onto something. Yeah.
Great.
What do we do now? Do we ask questions to people in the last minute?
I think we have less than a minute. I think we stand here.
God
awkwardly.
help us. What do we do now?
I think we're good.
I think you can just
The
sign
one
off.
time we need
Yeah.
the voice in the ear.
No, I think we're just gonna sign because we do have a schedule to keep. But again, thanks everybody very much.
Okay,
and
so
hope
what's
to see
next?
you.
Okay, the last minute.
What's
the
next?
last
Like, we're
minute
gonna
and
go
a
to Club
half? Like, what's
Fin
next?
and we're
Come
gonna
on.
go dance. That's what we're gonna do. Actually, there is I have another panel, but after that we're gonna go to Club Fin and go dance. So we'll see you all there. Thank you again for coming. Have a fantastic con.
Thank you to the Furality team as well. Seriously, this has been amazing. And yeah, it's beautiful. What a beautiful space. My God.